Welcome to the MAM journals. It's that time of year when I start sort of looking at registration volumes from the year before, and I was interested to see that BMW did 209,000 bikes last year, which for them is a record. Triumph did 98,000 bikes, again a record. Honda did 18.5 million, or 18.7 million, depending on which website you actually look at, but what's 200,000 bikes between friends? And Royal Enfield did a record for them, 920,000 bikes. I went to the NEC show and had a wander around the stand at the end of last year, and I saw this bike, and the team there were very excited and enthusiastic about this bike, the new Himalayan. I've been looking forward to testing it. Today, I'll be going through the specifications, I'll be going out for a ride, and then I'll come back and give you my thoughts and conclusions on the bike. As always, I hope that you enjoy the video. So, going through the specifications of the bike, I always like to start with the engine. It's a liquid-cooled 452cc single cylinder. It's got DOHC, and I never know whether that stands for double or dual in terms of the cams, but some manufacturers call it one thing and some another. It's fitted with 4 valves. It's a fuel-injected engine, and it's got 42mm throttle bodies, and it produces 40.2 PS at 8,000 revs. That converts, if you think in brake horsepower, that's 39.47. Let's call it 40 between friends. It also produces 40 Newton meters of torque at 5,500. So I quite like bikes or engines where the torque matches the power. The bike is fitted with a 6-speed gearbox, and it's got a wet multi-plate clutch with slip and assist. It's in chassis wise, it's got a steel twin spar tubular frame, and so it's not sort of, the engine's not popped into a cradle, so to speak. It's actually what's called a stress member, so part of the strength and rigidity of the frame is created through the bolts through the engine. It's got 1,510mm wheelbase, and the seat height, and I'll show you a little bit of that in a moment, that is in the normal seats which it's got on it, it's between 825 and 845mm. You can go for a lower option if that's a bit tall, and that takes you between 805 and 825. The bike weighs 196 kilos with 90% of its fuel tank capacity. It's got a 17-litre tank, and that in old money is about 3.7 gallons. That's imperial gallons, not American ones. And according to the tripometer, when you sort of get on there and you ask what the consumption and range you've got, when I filled it, it said I had 200 miles, but actually the calculations are much greater than that, because that would mean it did 53 miles to the gallon, and it frankly does somewhere between 70 and 80 miles to the gallon. So theoretically, depending on how deep the unusable amount of the fuel in there is, it's somewhere between 200 and 300 miles, so plenty of range for a small bike. Okay, let me just try and show you this seat arrangement. So the bike's a bit precarious. I'll show you why in a minute. We've sort of propped it up because the side stand gives a lot of drop. So you undo that, pull it out there. You can see there's a little catch in there which goes in there, evidence of steam cleaning. And you've got this area here. So you then twist again, and that just pulls off. Nice and tidy arrangement in there. And the adjustment that I just talked about is to do with these being very BMW-y in terms of how the system works, and clearly you can move these on rubber to either the higher position or the lower position. The bits nearer the seat are obviously the lower position. So quite straightforward and easy to adjust. I've got it on the lower of the settings. So just clips back in like that. Nice little toolkit in there. Don't know what's in it. Can't imagine it will be much, but better nothing. Better something than nothing, rather. And clicks in like that, and that is secure. So straightforward, quite a tidy little arrangement. I talked about precarious settings at the moment, so let me just show you around here what we've actually done to get this to an upright position, and I'm going to use the word very ill-advisedly, secure, is pop two bits of wood in there to get that. I need to show you something at the end there, because this angle, or stroke length, depending on how you look at it, means the bike does have a significant lean on it, which has its own implications. Not convinced about that, to be honest. Okay, so let's look at the front of the bike. The bike is fitted with upside down 43mm Showa front forks. They've got 200mm of travel in them, which tells you sort of just by the dimensions that it is genuinely intended to be used as a dual purpose bike. I'm not going to say a sort of full-on off-road bikes, because the competition bikes are enormous amounts of travel, but you know, these things have been seen and photographed and used genuinely off-road, and this is part of the designing characteristics of it. It's got, this is a 90/90 21-inch wheel. Again, an indicator. 21s is always gives me an indication that it's capable of doing a little bit of off-roading. For this, you can see that it's tubeless, on tube type rims. So I did actually check and say, well, are these actually tubeless? And for certainly for the UK market, they are genuinely tubeless. Other parts of the world, apparently, they put tubes in them. It's fitted with this is a 320mm disc, and it's got a double piston caliper here at the back. The bike has got ABS, which is switchable, and I'll show you a bit of that when we get to the TFT screen, and I'll show you how you can switch it on and off. The bike is fitted with a LED headlamp. You get a good view of King's sticker there, so my thanks to them as always for the loan of the bike. Okay, so going to the rear of the bike, it's suspension unit. This is a linkage type monoshock, very different from the previous Himalayan. It's got a twin-sided fabricated swing arm, and again, it's got 200mm of travel back here. This is a 270mm disc with a single piston caliper. You can see a bit of sort of light corrosion crater there where I steam washed it yesterday and didn't dry the bike off, but that will clear instantly once you actually apply the brakes. And I did it deliberately because I actually wanted to see whether the chain, which you can see through the wheel there, actually showed any sign of corrosion, because some of the earlier Royal Enfields I tried, you wash them overnight and you come back in the morning and they had rust on them, but I think they might have improved the quality of the chains that they're using, which is an interesting, for me, observation. The bike, as I say, is fitted with ABS, is switchable, and it is linked, which is that cable there. Here at the back there, it's got this integrated turn and tail lamps, so, and they're all LED. Nice little touches. So, looking at styling and aesthetics of the bike, I mean, clearly it is very, very different from its predecessor. It's a more sculptured, sort of modern look to it. And again, that sculpted seat sort of blending into the flared tank. So, quite a modern look. I quite like the small exhaust and tailpipe on there. I think that looks nice and in keeping with the bike. And it's nice and clean at the back. In terms of colours, these aren't, not a couple of people sort of mentioned to me, they weren't sure about the colour on that. I think I actually sort of spotted it on the 411 Scram, where they had a matte sort of utilitarian sort of look about them. And I think that's got some merit in a way, because it's a bike that's nice enough that you want to keep clean and look after, but not such a garage queen that you don't actually want to get it dirty or worried if it picks up any marks. That is called Casa Brown. They do other colours. I've seen one in a grey one. I think they call that Slate Himalayan. Salt, for some reason. But they've also, according to the website, they're also available blue, white and black. As I say, I quite like the matte finish. I think it suits the bike and would help you not be too precious about it. There are lots of accessories to the bikes. You can get sort of obviously engine guards, you can get luggage for it, you can get higher screens. So there's quite a lot of things that you can add on it if you want to use it for a bit more off-roading or a bit more exploring. I didn't see heated grips, but you could obviously get those fitted if you wanted, nor did I see handguards, but I'm sure they're available in the aftermarket. Having a look at this sort of instrumentation and its relationship with the technology available, it's a 4-inch round TFT. I quite like it. You've also got, which I won't go through, phone connectivity, maps, I think they're Google Maps on this, and what they call media control. But if anyone's had any experience of that, then please, please do comment on the in the comment section below and share your experiences of it. In terms of controls, over here you've got a mode button, and I'll do that one in a moment, but the controlling of the actual dial itself is done by 2 buttons. There's one button over the top here, which I'm sure by the magic of technology a photograph will appear, and there's a toggle down here which you can see as I'm moving it, it's already coming up and doing you various options. So you have a choice of what you look at and what readings are available to you. So obviously in terms of appearance, I'll just press that one in. Golden line, that's telling you what actually appears in there underneath as you go along, and you can alter that. So depending on which numbers you want to see the most regularly, you can set it accordingly. If I'm toggling down, I get to background, and then I press in, and I've got auto, which it's on at the moment. So in other words, if it's in a dark environment, which despite all the camera lights, it considers this a dark environment, it goes to the black screen, or you can have it on the dark theme as a regular choice. This auto means that once it's outside, it goes to white. When we go for a ride, you'll be seeing both screens, as certainly the white is much more visible on the GoPro. Right, so if you want to have a look and see, read your various measurements as you go along, then you just toggle to the left, and then you're then into a sort of cursoring, rolling menu of information. It's actually quite tight in here to actually get your thumb in, but particularly when you're scrolling down, it's much easier when you're doing it from the bottom up. So I did have a combination, which you'll see when we go for a ride, of sort of taking my hand off completely or trying to sort of fight my way past the indicator switch. So you can see it's got trip 1, toggle down trip 2, it's got fuel range, which I actually use quite a lot, fuel consumption in one point, and the fuel consumption has been remarkable, how much charge you're getting at any one point, service, it's overdue, that's my fault, I've taken it out and put some more miles on it, and engine temperature, particularly with a newish engine, I like to keep my eye on that, or if you believe that you're working the engine pretty hard. So you have got good visibility and you have got various functionality on it. It's a nice and clear screen, but you'll see that, well, you probably won't actually with a GoPro, but it is a clear screen when you're riding it. Easy to get access to information. Okay, so let's just have a look at the mode button. So I'm pressing the mode button. That gives me performance ABS on, probably the one for most people, certainly on the road, they use the most. If I go through, I can turn the rear ABS off, which is useful off-road. I've then got Eco. You won't be shocked to hear that I didn't try it in Eco. And ABS on, or Eco, rear ABS off. So have got some flexibility on it, which it's nice to have switchable ABS on a bike that you use off-road occasionally. Final thing while we're here looking at the front, it's actually got this little power point in here, which is quite neat. It says, I'm trying to read that, I think it says 5 volts, 2 amps, and it's that little C-type fastening in there, so keeping up with the times. Okay, so this is what I wanted to show you about this side stand. This is in a level position. It's a slight camber here, but not all car parks that we go to are entirely level. And you can see that it's actually a long way down. It's almost, you feel like you're taking a plunge into the unknown when you sort of drop it down. And it also means it's quite I heave up. Now, I'm not going to insult anybody's intelligence by saying that I'm fit, but I am pretty bike fit, and I found it a bit of a lump upwards on occasions, so I think some people might find that a bit of a concern. Clearly, there may be a way of extending that stand or putting another one on that gives it a more acute angle, holding it in a more upright position. Well, anyway, enough of all that. Let's go for a ride. As some of you may know, when I review a bike, I invariably ride it for 2 days, sometimes 3. This one was definitely a 3, and I'm glad that it was. My initial ride from King's two-wheel centre to my garage was a little, well, underwhelming. Lifting it up to get on board and then faffing about with the instrument settings wasn't the best of starts. It felt very different to the old Himalayan, but similar but not quite the same as some Japanese bikes I've ridden over the years. I put it into my garage, looked at it and wondered, so what's that all about then? Reflecting overnight, I took my own advice. Ride it for what it is and let it come to you. Leaving the cameras at home and just riding, I began to understand how the bike liked to be ridden, what gears, what revs, and how to work with suspension and chassis to get an enjoyable and engaging ride. I'm glad I spent the time doing so. This bike doesn't ride like the old Himalayan, nor is it a Japanese tribute. It rides like an all-new Himalayan, sharing a name and that distinctive Royal Enfield single-cylinder engine burble. It has its own distinct and enjoyable character. It is also significantly faster than its predecessor. More of that later. In town. This is Shipston on Stour. The Stour, by the way, is a river, and the bike is easy to balance and fairly flexible about what gear it's in. 20-mile-an-hour limit's best in third. At 30, it's comfortable in third, fourth, or even occasionally fifth, to suit you and the conditions. It putters along nicely, and the throttle is smooth and predictable. Brakes gentle and progressive. The next town was Stratford-on-Avon, another river, and the home of William Shakespeare, who, in his day, apparently wrote a few plays. The theatre, by the river, regularly hosts performances by the Royal Shakespeare Company and attracts visitors from around the world. The town had about 123,000 overseas visitors a year. That sounds like an awful lot of ice cream to me. With a bit more traffic, it was a good opportunity to see how the bike filtered. Stable and precise, this is definitely a bike you could commute on, if that is one of your criteria. It is a doddle to ride in traffic. I was also impressed with the new 6-speed gearbox. It's easy to change, and with 40 Newton meters of engine torque, flexible too. Stuck behind traffic and looking to amuse myself, I thought I'd see how easy it was to rev match the engine and clutch and perform clutchless changes up and down. Almost all of the changes you see in this sequence are without any use of the clutch. Not something I do often, of course. The clutch is there for a reason, but it is something I occasionally do in the colder winter months when conditions defeat my gloves. Personally, I think it is a sign of a well-designed and matched gearbox when you can do this. For potential off-roaders, it can also be helpful, and this bike is designed to be genuinely multi-purpose. So, another tick in the box from me. The bike was definitely winning me over. I made my way to my first scheduled coffee stop of the day at the excellent Piston Club, otherwise known as the Stag at Alchester. It is a motor racing themed pub, restaurant and coffee shop, and it's worth a visit if you're in the area, but it does get very busy at the weekends, so if you want a meal, a good idea to book. And no, I am not on commission. They wouldn't, as the saying goes, know me from Adam. I just enjoy it there, and it seems a shame not to tell you about it. Catching up with a friend and taking the opportunity to change the TFT settings, I made my way to slightly faster roads. This is a surprisingly responsive bike. Not fast, and I have bikes that are. I don't think I can describe it as brisk either. Normally my euphemism for a bike that actually cracks on. It is, for a 450, definitely nippy. The old Himalayan runs out of steam between 80 and 85 miles an hour and can take a while and the right conditions to get there. This new 450 with 40.2 PS, mustn't forget the 0.2, is actually far more willing. I did find a video on YouTube of a certifiable Indian guy testing his 450. He was weaving through mixed traffic of cars, trucks, bicycles, pedestrians and the occasional donkey. He managed to record an indicated 163 kph. That is 101 miles per hour. I wouldn't know, of course, but I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if the bike I rode couldn't do similar. I always assume speedometers are optimistic, and the faster you go, the more optimistic they become. 10% of a lot is a lot more than 10% of a little, but this is almost certainly a 90-something miles per hour bike out of a 450 single. That, to me, is nippy. Overtakes in the real world are straightforward, and you don't need a week to plan them. I think you could actually tour on this bike comfortably. It could do dual carriageways, motorways at 70 odd miles an hour. You could do sort of hills and mountains quite comfortably, and you could even do a little bit of sort of off-roading, as long as it wasn't too strenuous. So those, to me, are good criteria for certainly a solo trip abroad for those who are in less of a hurry and want to take the views in. I thought the new central round TFT was also a step forward, although initially perplexing. Once I'd got my mind around the basic structure, it was pretty easy to use. You can cursor through the settings as you go, and although the down stroll was a bit tight for space, I did it with both my hands on the bars and by lifting my left hand off. The information is much easier to read than the GoPro footage suggests. I tend to keep my eye on range and temperature, and both were accessible and clear. I do prefer this new dash to the slightly busier earlier model. Ready for another coffee, I headed to another favourite coffee stop, the Classic Motor Hub at Ablington near Bybury. We recorded a video on their bike ride-in day recently, and I've included a link to that video in the description box should you want to watch it. The lanes to the hub were definitely in this new Himalayan's comfort zone. It's actually easier to ride on here on this than it is on some of my sports orientated bikes, which can get a bit excited by the holes and undulations. This bike couldn't care less, and was good fun. The restraining factor along here is actually other traffic which can appear quickly and not the bike. I did actually film all of the GoPro footage that you're seeing today on the third day and rode the bike along my bump test road the day before and in the rain. It coped with it very well, as you would expect of a dual purpose bike with 200mm of suspension travel at either end. Today I enjoyed the sun and panoramic views across the beautiful Gloucestershire countryside. After a quick coffee break and a few photos, I headed out in the lane leading to Byberry. Pheasants were apparently brought to Britain by the Romans. They are reared here in the UK and released into woods. Their capacity for self-harm is legendary. This one managed to head back into the woods, but on the basis they haven't got the slightest idea where they're actually going and the intellectual capacity of a stick, they can be hard to second guess. I have a few close calls every year, but nothing that worries me. The joys of the countryside. On the road to Burford, I reflected on my 3 rides on the bike. A 240-mile adventure through different types of roads and conditions. The more I rode it, the more I understood it, and the more I liked it. The engine is willing and for its capacity, lively. The gearbox smooth and easy, and the suspension chassis and tyres coped with everything I asked of it. For a £6,000 bike, it handles and rides well. Wet or like today, dry and sunny. It was these reflections that prompted me to ask myself, is this actually the best Royal Enfield I've ridden? Right, so before I answer that question, just a few reflections on Royal Enfield generally. Do I think that this new Himalayan will be their best seller? Well, probably not. The 350 Classic has done exceptionally well for them in their home market in India, and I'll be surprised if it doesn't continue to do so. Here in Europe, the popular bikes have proved to be the 650 engine bikes, which is a nice twin with a good gearbox. Some of the suspension out of the crate isn't perfect, and a lot of people choose to modify those. So, coming back to this question, is it the best Royal Enfield that they've made? Well, I think, as I just described, out of the crate, ready to ride, perfectly capable, flexible and engaging, I think it probably is. I do hope that you've enjoyed this video, and if you did, you might consider pressing like or even consider subscribing to the channel. But as is always the case, I'm very relaxed about that. What is most important is that you ride safe and that you stay well.